August 21st, 2023. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cerrone,
Here.
Mr. Gatewood,
Present.
Ms. Johnson,
Present.
Dr. Murillo,
Present.
Mr. Ploger,
Present.
Ms. Simulton,
Present.
Ms. Venmuth.
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to thank the public for attending tonight's meeting. We value the feedback we receive from our members of the public and encourage everyone to take an active interest in their public school system. Members of the public interested in speaking to the Board of Education this evening are asked to have completed a comment card and presented it to the secretary to the board. When the secretary calls your name, I ask that you come to the microphone, state your name for the public record, and provide your feedback. Please note that comments are limited to 5 minutes per person and that no discussion of personnel matters, stating staffing names or responses to your questions are not permitted. The board does not participate in discussion during public comment. Follow-up to your questions or concerns will be addressed by administration through the contact information provided on the comment card. Thank you.
Michelle Traeger.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michelle Traeger, and I'm a parent of 4 kids in District 308. I wanted to address the board tonight just with the reminder that September is Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Awareness Month across the country and around the world, with September 9th being FASD Awareness Day. Our district added these to our calendar last year. The quick refresher is that fetal alcohol spectrum disorders are a lifelong invisible disability and the leading cause of developmental disorders in the Western world. The prevalence conservatively is 1 in 20. That's more than twice the prevalence for autism. 1 in 20 means at least 1 student in every classroom in this district. Over 97,000 students in Illinois and more than 850 in SD308. Most of these students have not been diagnosed and many have not been identified for special ed services. General ed teachers and the deans and principals are encountering these students. Due to increased alcohol consumption during the pandemic, we expect prevalence to increase, and soon our early childhood staff will encounter an increase of students who had prenatal alcohol exposure. And as a public school district, we must adhere to child find. Most individuals with an FASD have IQs in the typical range. They have executive functioning and adaptive skill impairments that often manifest behaviorally. But because of high verbal skills, and because over 90% of those affected do not have facial features of full fetal alcohol syndrome, these students are at risk of being perceived as willfully defiant or unworkable in our current systems of learning theory. When in reality, these students have deficits in memory, processing, abstract thinking, language, and executive functioning. Their developmental age often is much less than their chronological age and is uneven across different domains. This means their brains may not be able to do the tasks that we expect them to do. And when this happens, frustration and anger can escalate both for students and for staff, which results in power struggles that serve to further increase behaviors. If we learn to recognize when a brain functions differently and build upon student strengths, then we can create appropriate accommodations and supports for a good fit between the environment/expectations and what the student can do. This is the neurobehavioral approach and should be considered when typical rewards, consequences, point level systems, sticker charts, and PBIS have been ineffective. This approach is useful for any student with a brain-based difference, including exposure to other drugs or teratogens, acquired brain injuries, illnesses that affect the brain, genetic conditions, other neurodiversities, and trauma. Trauma-informed is more than asking about feelings and observing behaviors. It's understanding how trauma actually changes the structure of the brain, in regard to learning and effectively responding to that. We need training to begin to know what it is that we don't know, what it looks like, why these students haven't been diagnosed. The truth is, we don't need a confirmed diagnosis to recognize when someone's brain functions differently. So how do we recognize this as a brain-based disability? And then how do we intervene effectively and support families? The board and administration discusses teaching and reinforcing common behavioral expectations, supportive discipline, and integrating SEL with academics. But you can't do that completely if you don't know about FASD. You will talk about training regarding suicide prevention and implementing programming for mental health. But you can't do that if you don't learn about FASD. Remember that over 90% of individuals with AFSD have a co-occurring mental health diagnosis. And the rate of adolescent males with FASD who reported a serious suicide attempt was 19.5 times higher than national norms for males. In the last Congress, Representative Lauren Underwood was one of over 70 representatives and 10 senators who signed on to co-sponsor a federal bipartisan bill to reauthorize funding that has expired for FASD programs and strengthen existing programs. The intent was to establish a national FASD agenda and structure at the state, tribal, and local levels. The goal was not to create a whole new system, but to infuse FASD-formed care into already existing systems. Unfortunately, that bill did not make its way out of the Senate before time ran out. But the FASD Respect Act has been reintroduced in this 118th Congress as of June, and that's H.R. 3946 and Senate Bill 1800. While the board as an entity cannot endorse proposed legislation, as individual citizens, you can contact Representative Underwood's office and ask her to sign on again. And you can contact the offices of Senators Durbin and Duckworth and ask them to do so as well. As always, I will be happy to provide information for FASD Awareness Month and any other information that would be helpful to serving students and families in 308. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
5.1. Dr. Kelgatti, we will have your superintendent report now.
Thank you, Madam President. And so this evening we begin. This is our first official board meeting within the school year. We had one right before as we began to prepare for the school year, and now we have officially launched. And just really want to congratulate, first and foremost, all of our students for coming to school prepared. How are the children? Prepared. I have to tell you, it was so joyful to be with all the board members. We have visited so far, I would say 2/3 of all our schools, high school, elementary, and middle school. And I want to thank the board and its board members for its dedication in joining me in these walkthroughs and welcoming students. And I say prepared because I got to tell you, I was impressed. I think every kindergarten we saw arrive just said, "Bye, Mom," and walked in the building, or "Bye, Dad," or "Bye," And it was just really a joy to observe that level of confidence. And that's not by accident, right? Those things don't just happen in a vacuum. There's a reason for that, and the reason is two things. Number one, our parents, our families, you are our partners. When we see that happen, it means that you've entrusted and you've prepared your child to be ready for school, and they are excited, and they are confident, and they are walking in ready and joyful. And so I want to thank our families for their partnership in this work. Secondly, our educators. I don't know what you did, but you got them psyched. You got them ready, and you communicated a spirit of confidence and welcome that invited those students into those spaces. I think the week before I attended everything from there was a foam machine at one of the schools to a foam machine, yes. They had a beach party at Long Beach. I saw students running around soaked to events where there were jump houses and everything. From the outside, you may see some of these things as a bit superfluous, but I got to tell you, what it does for the child, for the students, is it makes them feel welcome. It makes them feel like this is a place of joy. A number of board members that would ask, "Are you having fun?" And I got to tell you, I think every student said, yes, they're having fun. So I want to thank the board for that journey, and the teachers, the parents, our building grounds team, our finance team, our human resources team, our our student services, the registration work, all of this, the curriculum planning, getting the books ready for teachers, all of this plays a role in making sure that when we land well, and we're able to prepare for our students. And so I think that that is a huge celebration to starting well. Now, before a couple other things I want to bring up for the board this evening, so this will be a bit of a longer update than usual, but I think it's important for this meeting. A lot is on people's hearts, and so one of the things that everybody, I've been getting a lot of texts, there's a lot of, where I hear there's going to be hot weather this week. So it's getting hot in Oswego this week and across this northern Cook area. We are expecting significantly higher than normal temperatures. And we have been tracking this. We actually had a meeting about this on Saturday. I brought members of my cabinet together this past Saturday. We began our preparations. We've reached out to neighboring superintendents and school districts to find out how they're planning and preparing. So number one is awareness. Many of you, if not already, you've received a message this evening from me about awareness around what we are doing in the district. And so number one, we are going to be limiting our time outdoors. Everything from drills have been canceled, and lining up for the buses, and any of those things will all happen within the building. It's essentially going to be kind of an inclement weather situation, and we're not going to do any of those things. We're going to hold off on those. We're going to remind families to send your children to school with water bottles. We will also have, our buildings and grounds team will have water bottles prepared, so as students get ready to go home, they'll have access to water if they need it. As they get ready on the buses. Number two, transportation. We want to encourage our families, if you can, again, if you can, drive your children to school. Even if they can walk, if you can, drive your children to school. We want to make sure that children are not walking in that heat. We don't know what this may or may not feel like, and so if you can't pick up and drive them to school, that will make a big difference, and we'll be prepared for that. Know the signs. Understand what heat what are the symptoms for really being impacted by the heat? We're concerned about our staff who are on buses or in our arrival areas, and so that is something we're working on. Lastly, we'll know where the cooling centers are. The message I sent explained the awareness around the cooling centers. In our county, there are a number of cooling centers. And in our school buildings, we are also having cooling areas. And so principals are prepared that if a particular area in any school building gets a little warm, there are cooling areas in buildings, and so we are prepared for that as well. This evening, I'm going to switch gears. We're going to talk a little bit. You have a chance to hear about our budget, the FY24 school budget. Dr. Petsky will be leading our conversation through that. This is really an important opportunity for the community and for the board, of course, to hear about. You will hear a presentation tonight of the tentative budget. This will then be placed in. This budget will be on public display at the library. Notice of this will be circulated, and then the final budget presentation and voting will happen on September 20th. The final budget presentation will be on September 25th, and then it will be adopted. There will be a public hearing for this beginning September 30th. Dr. Petsky will review this in more detail. Transportation. I want to thank the community for their communication about the challenges. The team has been working very hard. Overall, we are seeing significant improvements, though it may not feel like it. We are delivering many students every day, so there is a silver lining. Many, many, many students are. But we can do better, and we know this. We can do better, and we know this. And those things we can control around communication, we have been working to figure out what are the gaps in the communication. Members of the team are there every day. We have been working. We have check-ins every day at 12 and at 5 to review the challenges and to address them and to improve them. So it may not feel like it's improving yet, but we are working on improving those significant challenges that we know are happening. We can't control bus. There's everything from traffic backups to accidents that happen on the roadway. We know those things are going to happen that are going to delay our transportation. What we can't control is communication. So we're aware of that, and we are applying more and more resources every day to that problem. Some of these were known problems. Some of them were unknown to us, and so when those were unknown, we are working to address those. Tennis court updates. Now, I understand that the good news is that OEHS high schools has completed their tennis courts. Those have been updated and are ready to go, and we're grateful for the team's work on that. OHS, I understand, will be ready as of October 6th. and that is the anticipated date for OHS's tennis court updates. I'll be working with our new CFO to review what were the procedural challenges that occurred regarding these things, so the board is aware that it's not lost to me that there were both some delays due to rain weather. However, how our contracts are executed, how we're reviewing this, I'll be working with our new CFO to identify, are there procedural, are there contractual things that we can identify and we can work to improve, so that looking ahead, when we get these contracts, we can monitor them in a way that then ensures that we are timely and it does not impact our students, which it did. And that is a concern for me, and that is a concern that I want to bring to the board in full transparency to make sure we address those. The same goes for our tracks. Our track update in OE, my understanding is that is still in a continued challenge, and I'm sorry, I think I'm reversing those. So OE's track is ready to go, and OHS there are still some unforeseen, OHS is going to be completed by midweek of next week and started at the beginning of next week, and then OE was the update there. Mr. Queen, did you want to add anything to that? Just to make sure, please come to the mic. I want to just make sure you have a chance to correct anything I may have reversed there.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi, Mr.
All
Queen.
right.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah, we're having some-
Director, introduce who you are for the.
Director of Operations, Bill Queen. So yeah, we're experiencing some issues with getting the plane surface purchased and brought here. There was something that where they shut down, sold out, whatever. But we're in a situation now to where we need to find a new rubber surface to go onto these tracks. So that is where that delay is going to be for those.
Okay.
But they are on point. Their asphalt's in, the asphalt's there. We're doing some remodifications to the jump pits here at OE. OHs, they're in the process of getting laid, and they will have asphalt on them this weekend, anticipating we get the materials for the base to go over for the running surface.
And I've communicated already to Mr. Queen and to Dr. Petsky that we're reviewing fully our notes regarding these actions, and so that we can go back to these vendors around why there are these contractors, why there are these kinds of delays, and what we can do to completely avoid these kinds of situations in the future. So thank you, Mr. Queen, to
Thank
you
you.
and your team. Last, just one of the things that I did mention in my opening comments, just that our Human Resources Department and our school leaders and our teams worked very closely to ensure that we were able to staff all of our classrooms day one. That is a big deal, that students arrived with a teacher, not just a, we appreciate our guest educators, but those guest educators were prepared to welcome students fully and make them feel welcome and prepared for the school year. So that's significant, given all the national shortages for educators. If you watch the news, you know that is not a small thing. Meanwhile, we recognize that as staff exit the district, at times we are working on exit slips to ensure that we are understanding what's leading to this change in climate and culture in our district, and if any things that we can improve upon. So we have a staff survey for exiting educators that we are making sure that we can then provide them, and that's been put into place already. All right, and that brings us to the close of our comments, and I'll turn it over to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kilgatti. 5.2, board member comments. Who would like to start with board member comments?
Sure, I'll start. I had a wonderful opportunity last week, first day of class, to do walkthroughs at 3 different schools. At Long Beach, had an opportunity to walk through every kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, and 5th grade. We missed 4th grade because they were all in special, so we didn't get a chance to see them, but that was wonderful. I was able to be there for students as they dropped off at Thompson, and then give a lot of high fives to kids as they were exiting Plank. And I just wanted to say that I try to be very observant. I have an operational eye, and what I saw from the staff was a very well coordinated, hardworking, intentional staff that work with care and I saw that firsthand. So I just want to thank all of the staff for all of your hard work, everything you're doing, and I look forward to continuing to support throughout the year.
Thank you.
Thank you. What other board members were with you in your?
It's different in every school. So I think Dr. Kilgatti and I and Jen were at Long Beach. And then at Thompson, it was myself and Dr. Kilgatti again, and yourself, yes. And then at Plank, it was myself and Dominic and think that's it. No, and Dr. Gilgotti was there as well.
All right. Anyone else want to speak? Go ahead, Mary.
I hate to, and I know you've already addressed this, but I just wanted to comment too, because I lost track of how many schools I've been to. Certainly not as many as you, Dr. Calgatti, but I think it's either 9 or 10 in the past week, and it was just a great experience. I mean, there was one student that when I asked if you were having fun, they did say no.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
But you know that makes it real, so that's all good.
Yes.
The realest moment for me was when a first grader came up to me unprompted and looked at me and said, "Are you a grandma?" At which point I thought I need to start dyeing my hair again. But anyway, no, it was really great to see all the kids. I don't know, Jared, if you want to say anything about Springfield at all, or so.
Talk to, I mean, I can when I go, but yeah, I'll
Okay.
talk about infrastructure and all that stuff. Yeah.
So I will. I'll defer to you on that. But anyway, it was great to see. It was great to see everyone at all the schools.
Thank you.
Amy?
Good first week of school. Kudos to the staff and to the students. And I know I'll just mention as we go around, there's more meet and greets coming up with the superintendent. So I was able to attend some recently along with other board members. So we're keeping busy, making sure everyone's got a good start to the school year and also getting to know our superintendent.
I just want to thank the school visits have been very impactful for me. So I want to thank you for the invitation. I think that when we have the opportunity to be invited, we're a little bit more prone to attending because sometimes it feels overwhelming with all the things going on. So thank you for allowing us to join the schools. One of the assistant principals said to me, I said, you are ready. And he said, yes, because we have good systems in place and good people in place. And that was music to my ears. So shout out to Assistant Principal Furco at Trauber. I love to hear those things. And secondly, I just wanted to say I had a very quick stop at the Silver Bash at OE on Friday, and then a little longer stop at OHS at the Panther Fest. And I was beaming with pride. Our students were so energetic. Our parents were energetic, and it was the full range of students, the young ones to the older ones, and it was such a great experience, and saw a lot of administrators, and it was just I couldn't be more proud of Oswego on Friday. And finally, I just want to reiterate, I won't get mad that someone stole my thunder, but September is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and that does refer to the broad range of lifelong birth defects and neurodevelopment abnormalities that occur as a result of prenatal alcohol exposure. I really had no idea about this 2 years ago and have come a long way, and I didn't realize how much it affects our day-to-day students and the classrooms that they're in, along with all of our educators. Statistics and data support that roughly, and this is the best that we know, 1 in 20 children have been exposed to alcohol during pregnancy. After the pandemic, that number is expected to rise greatly. I am proud that SD308 is raising awareness for this spectrum disorder, and on September 9th, International FASD Day, I will be rocking my red shoes and spreading awareness of this invisible but prevalent educational disruptor, and I ask everyone to join me.
I'll just echo. It was a great week. Enjoyed my visits. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's great to see is, we all visited schools. We certainly all shared some great experiences. It's good to see the board acting as a team, and I think that's something to. I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back. It's just when people want to look for high functioning boards and what's going on, the fact that we're a team and we're all in these schools, that's a great sign. Mary Jo brought up Springfield. I did have the opportunity to meet with some U.S. rep and a few state senators and state reps, I continue, and I'll ask again about how much we're going to rely on EBF when it comes to the budget, and eventually when we get to projections and so forth. And I can't stress enough that please, Oswego School District 308 needs those funds to continue. There's also the concern with Title I and some of the spending cuts that are proposed at the national level too. So it never hurts. Somebody told me one time that if you go in person, that's like 5 phone calls, and calling is pretty high. And of course, if all you can do is email, then email. But district continues to need those Title I funds. And the other conversation, of course, was around infrastructure and the residual effect that will happen on all of our taxing bodies, because I know last Friday, of course, absolutely, that was something out of everyone's control. Route 34 but you got to see firsthand how delicate our infrastructure already is, and some people are like, well, no duh, I've been sitting on Route 34 now all the time because it's a parking lot, where instead of in the past where it was only during rush hour. And one of the things to consider is when you are traveling these back roads, realize that whether they're township or county roads, there's a cost there as well, because then those roads are getting more wear and tear quicker. So our infrastructure continues to be very fragile. You know, and I brought this up, and you know, there was a person in the district who had talked about when they were younger dealing with a train derailment. Our state is one of the, if not the most, leading the nation in most derailments. We have, any of you who reside with me over in the 9th Ward, you see those tankers going down, a very tight infrastructure. If we had to evacuate, I'm curious what it would have looked like, if it would have looked like Friday. So I know Dr. Kelgati have talked about trying to be a conduit if we can, because we deal with a lot of taxing bodies, whatever we can do, right, to help with that infrastructure. And we certainly are, we want to be people who help in that regard. And again, that's something else that you can reach out and write about to your local legislators as well. The need is there. I know I said it last time, but I'll say it again. If you were to take some of these municipalities around here, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but if you went through all the municipalities that are listed on our front, we would be I think it is the 40th largest city in the United States. So think about the infrastructure that we have in place for that. So I'll continue to talk about it because I hate to see our community dealing with the stress. So.
Continue to talk about it because it will impact our school district, and we're looking forward to the work that we're going to do legislatively to impact our school district. Like the rest of our team, I do want to echo what Jen says about the invitation. You know, it took a lot of coordinating from Ursula, so thank you very much for that. But the invitation to be a part of the first day of school is really important, and I'm glad that we were all able to participate and are continuing to participate. So I was at Brokaw today, and it was just so nice to see those small little faces. Oh my God, it was adorable. And there was one girl, she had a great day at school, and she was sitting there, and her teacher was entertaining her, and when she saw her mom, she just broke out in tears. And I think it was just because, you know, she realized, oh my God, I missed her. I didn't realize I was having so much fun, and the tears just came. But we assured her mom that she had a great day, and the difference between that and junior high, when, you know, you get to junior high, I mean, the 6th graders, they were, you know, you saw the apprehension on their faces, and so as a mother, I understood that, and so I was trying to encourage them. You know, I would tell them what I always told my son: go be great, have a great day, have a great year, And so you kind of saw the weight kind of lift off of their shoulders. And then when you get to high school, it's just like, oh, this is no big deal. You know, they had the bands out there, and they were running through the Panther and all that, and it was like, oh, this is old hat for me. So it was just good seeing it, and you know, thank you for leading us, and we are going to have a great year. So thank you.
I think kudos goes to our principals. I would say that they really welcomed us in all these spaces, and not just us, their students, their staff. There's a lot of groundwork that goes into doing and experiencing what we experience. So really a huge shout out to our school leaders in making it happen, right? And that they are often behind the scenes, and we don't see what they do, but when you see the magic come together, it's really their leadership that shines. And we want to thank our school leaders for their efforts in this work. And we're just getting started, right? So this is a school year has many days in it, and so as they say, keep going and keep coming. And it's going to be a year of hard work for all of us, but it's exciting to start on such a high and positive note where we're thinking about our community. The Back to School Bash was another way that we set that, and that was a time where we brought all our staff together to start the year. And our theme this year is community, because none of this can happen without that community focus. And the Panther and the Wolves Fest were both highlights for me, in seeing those football teams really celebrate, and the bands coming together, and the cheerleaders and everybody. Both events were really highlights for me as we ended our first 3 days of school.
May I say one more thing? I just wanted to say I had the opportunity during one of my visits to sit in a cross-cat classroom, and the dedication of the staff for these students was amazing. And one of the students met their goal in class, and we got to dance and sing to Miley Cyrus's "Party in the USA," which is one of my favorite songs. So we had so much fun, and so that was at Fox Chase, and it was phenomenal. And then I just want to give a shout out to the robotics team at the Back to School Bash, because they were next to us. I got a chance to see them in action, and I've been following them on Facebook and logging on to all of the events that they go to, but to see them and to meet them all and to watch what they have brilliantly designed was so cool. And I just wanted to give a shout out to that, and then all of the vendors that joined us. It was just a great event, and to meet students and teachers and their families and educators and all of our staff was just way cool. So kudos to the entire team that put that together.
For sure. Okay. 6.1, consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent agenda?
You gotta make the motion first. Let me make the motion.
Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including minutes of the special Board of Education meeting on July 31st, 2023, open and closed session, minutes of the Board of Education meeting on August 7th, 2023, and closed session, and to acknowledge the FOIA requests received by the district.
Okay.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Dr. Murillo?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Venmus?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
So this evening, Board, we have a presentation from Dr. Pesky, as I mentioned in my comments, regarding our FY 22-24 budget presentation. Dr. Pesky?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kilgatti. Thanks for letting me present this to the board tonight. We want to present the tentative budget for, as you look up there, sometimes people get confused about how we list our year, but it's the 2023-24 school year, but we refer to it in finance terms as the fiscal year 24, FY 24. So I'll be presenting tonight, but I do want you to know I've got a great team in the finance office who have been helping to support to put this together. So I've got Amanda Sitar, I've got Debbie Smith as our bookkeeper, and Terry Gacci as our executive assistant, who's really helped out and put a lot of information together for us. It's a big process putting the revenues and expenditures all together. So just as a reminder for the board and for the community who are listening, this slide I really like to include in all my presentations to let you know that the budget, it's extremely important, but it also serves several purposes for the district. So one of those purposes is, well, it's required by the school law. We have to have one. Number two is it provides us the expending and taxing authority. Without a budget, we would not have the capacity to do those things. But more importantly, it serves as a financial plan for all of our departments. It looks at all of the financial resources that we have, and it looks at all of our different departments, the buildings that we have, and makes sure that we are fiscally responsible in what we're doing. And then ultimately, the budget that we're looking at is used as a management and communication tool. You can really see a lot of the priorities and the things that we focus on in the budget and in the finances. So one of the things there's a timeline, or there's some budget requirements. So this slide just kind of points that out. Number one, we are on today, and that is August 22nd, sharing with the board an opportunity to see the FY24 tentative budget. After today, the budget will be placed on public display for 30 days, allow the public to see what's happening with their dollars as a public body. Also, we'll have a publication in the newspaper. That'll be going out in the Beacon News to let people know that we're considering the tentative budget and that they can call the finance office and speak with us if there's any questions. And then step number two is the final budget adoption, which is at the September 25th board meeting. So there will be a public hearing where we formally present the FY24 budget. The board will then be asked to adopt that budget. The reason it happens in September is our fiscal year runs from July until June, and the budget is supposed to be adopted by the end of the first quarter of our fiscal year. Since our fiscal year begins in July, that first quarter is in September. And then when the board votes on that, or it sees that final budget, then there's a bunch of budget filing steps that take place. So with the county clerk, with the Illinois State Board of Education, and then also with our regional office of education. In addition to that, though, we also keep in mind we've got one more board meeting in between now and September 25th. So it's another opportunity where we can publicly talk about the budget and some of the assumptions, some of the items that are in there. So if the board is looking at the budget and has any questions, September 11th will be a great time to have that discussion. But Dr. Calgatti and myself would also like to offer the board an opportunity to meet one-on-one. So we can schedule some time where we can have you in the superintendent's office. We can sit down with the tentative budget and really look at those numbers, look at the impact from a board member's perspective. So if that's something you're interested in, we definitely will extend that invitation.
Questions, board?
Just
Yeah, Jared.
So
I have
far?
one, just so I know. Along the timeline, when will we have the projections with and without EBF and with and without a CPI levy?
Yeah, you know, and I can provide those at any time. Now that we've got the tentative budget, there's just a few other things to wrap up. What I'd like to do is confirm some of those assumptions that'll be happening between now and September 25th. And I'm seeing that even on September 25th would be an appropriate time to show, with this budget adoption, here's what the next projections could look like.
Okay,
So-
and will that be open also to, so that the because like I noticed, jumps out at me in the next slide right away, evidence-based formula, we had an $8 million increase, so I think it's important for the community to see what that is.
Yeah,
looks like.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And those
Thank you.
projections will give a nice context to show where we are and where we could have been.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. So this is a slide that we use in the finance department. If you look at this table, this is just revenue, thus the color green at the top, bringing the money in. And these are several factors that we look at. It's very high level, but it talks about like our equalized assessed value. It talks about new growth in the district. It talks about CPI and how that impacts us, which interestingly enough, in about 30 years, we've never had a 5% CPI. it's always been about 0.08, 1.4, 2.0, 2.4. And the economy lately has been in a position where we have seen CPI figures as high as 5%. We also have CPPRT, which is corporate personal property replacement tax. The district always sees a little bit of revenue there. We talk about our fees and academic and athletic fees. So that's another conversation too, because we do, we do talk about that quite a bit. As Jared just mentioned, our evidence-based funding, we know what it was last year. So that's what this slide is showing here. FY23 last year, it was $89 million that we received in just evidence-based funding. This year, we got our foundation level, which was 89 million, but because we're a tier 1 district, we got about 8.5% to 9% more. So we did see about $8.8 million increase in evidence-based funding.
Can I ask a
And
question?
to Jared's point, that's not a guarantee every year. So that's nice that we got this year, but it's definitely something we're keeping a close eye on. Sorry, Dominic.
When do we find out what tier we're in? When we get the amount, and or do we know that sooner than?
What they did is there's a whole calculator spreadsheet that the state uses to determine what that tier funding is. They just gave the distribution calculated numbers out. I want to say it was about a week and a half ago, maybe even a week ago. Things have been happening on warp speed lately. So it was just in August here that they released those numbers.
If you ever want to, I carry it around with me. Literally, I carry it around so I can look up every district and figure out the percentage they're at.
Yeah.
No, I'm just wondering, so do we find out what tier we're in simultaneously with what dollar amounts we're getting? Or, because I know that it changes year to year.
We do,
Right.
yeah.
So
And
is
we're
that-
still in tier 1. So the thing that we'll be looking at and monitoring is based on the increased revenue that we get, at what point would the district be in tier 2 and then in tier 3 and
Right, yeah.
whatnot, so. Yep. In addition, we've got our mandated categoricals as a source of revenue. We've got our federal grants as a source of revenue. And then we also have there just our final year of ESSER, the COVID relief dollars that we are looking at using this year too.
Can I ask a question about the federal grant piece?
Yeah.
I don't know how much we've been monitoring the federal budget proposals, but from what I'm gathering, there's a hit on Title I funds if that, without some alteration to some of the budget. And I'm curious if we are monitoring that when we factor in that, what I guess where we're at, could that change? Could this change between, because they could adopt a budget that cuts those Title I funds, and I'm just
Yeah.
curious about where we're at with that.
Probably one of the biggest conversation pieces that the district would have to have around that is typically our grant dollars revenue line up with our expenditures. So we would have to look at that, and I'm kind of looking out of the corner of my eye with Heather. That's a good conversation as a grant administrator. If we only pull in half the revenue, what does that do to our programs, or what would that look like? And do we need to supplement with, are there some things we have in place that we would want to continue? Well, that would have to come from local dollars. So that's definitely a conversation we would be monitoring.
So for this current fiscal year, we saw an increase in Title I dollars, not a decrease.
Okay.
So that's not to say for future years, we wouldn't have to have those conversations, but for this current year, we actually received additional dollars.
So this might be something where we would see pop up in fiscal year 25?
Potentially, depending.
Okay, thanks. That's good to
So
know.
I just have a few questions from a document that was presented to us earlier this summer regarding federal grants. That number went up significantly, and then regarding ESSER, it went down. And we have been talking about and have requested a few times to kind of have an ESSER overview to see what's been going on. But the last projection assumptions, ESSER was at 6.7 and it's now at 4.8. Dr. Kelgati, can we have an understanding of how we've spent our ESSER dollars over time,
Yep.
please?
In that, just to speak to that point real quick, what you see here is there are more federal ESSER dollars coming in. What this 4.8 million represents is the district 3 years ago was given $12.5 million.
Right.
And we spent that, there were 3 years we spent the money, but we also were able to, if we didn't spend it, carry it over. So
Right.
there are some additional dollars that we'll realize in rollover dollars. So that first number you had was kind of a conglomerate of what do we still have that we haven't spent and what's rollover. And what I did here, you'll notice here, is we're balancing the revenue with the expenditure. So when the revenue went down, the expenditures went down. Until I see what those rollover dollars are and where we're expending them, then we'll have those numbers back to the
And I
actual.
totally understand that.
Yeah.
What we haven't seen is where, in a long time, it is an update on where
On the
where
ESSER
that money
spending.
was spent. And I think even bigger point is, once that money's gone, what are our contingency plans for what we use that money for? And I'm just gonna use an example, and this isn't one, but if we hired $1.8 million worth of instructional coaches and we don't have that money past 24, maybe the answer is we've already baked it into a budget. What I would love is for the current board, and as the next board will take over in 25, is to have the documentation of seeing that spending over time. Because when something gets taken away, it creates a hole, and where are we going to, manage that hole moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
So I just would really like a separate,
ESSER
ESSER.
overview.
Yes, please.
All right.
So, and Jen, those new grant applications started to get released actually today for the state for digital equity. So I'm anticipating ESSER 3. As Dr. Petsky mentioned, we do have some additional carryover, especially with ESSER 3, and to the point of beyond fiscal year 24. That is part of the expenditure projections that are factored into those projections starting next year. So
I saw an email today about what came out today, which is what got me thinking, so thank you.
So more information to come shortly.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Latanya.
I don't know if I should ask it here or somewhere else, regarding grants. Do you feel like we are being aggressive when it comes to, opportunities to look at grants, to apply for grants? Because we encountered as a board an individual who told us he knew where all the grant money was, and that there was a whole lot more for us to get. And I don't.
Can I answer that?
Well, I was
We
gonna
have
say, I've
a
got
very
some too.
small amount of people all of their plates are so full. So if that's something that needs to be addressed, I think Dr.
Well-
Kelgati needs to look at,
'Cause if
who can
if
do that.
I don't know if that person was just blowing smoke, or were they really
Well-
saying the truth about that?
Well, can I add one piece, because I'm glad you brought this up, because there's been times where I've been approached also, and Heather, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong. There are certainly grants out there that I'm sure we would love to pursue. The problem is it's usually matching grants, and that would you can correct me where I'm wrong, either one of you, but going after matching grants is going to be a situation where we are going to need more money at our disposal. And correct me where I'm wrong, but I mean, and I get people being frustrated with that, but I'll let you take it from there.
Well, I'll start by just saying that one, I think we have some good news. We've been applying 2 grants, and I just think that I was with Dr. Kincaid earlier today, and she's led us in submitting final proposal on a $400,000 grant. And so we're looking under rocks to find those that are available. I think there is an issue of identifying a grants person who's an independent, a full person for private grants, right? So if we're talking about private grants, that there are, and in a lot of those, there are matching contingencies. Also, private grants really want a robust 501c3 partner where they can funnel those funds to.
Yes.
And so I think part of the board's charge to me is to really look at the kind of financial sustainability infrastructure that's there, and then to build upon that. Dr. Kincaid or anybody on the team, Faith or Heather or John.
Last
add to
year,
that?
Mrs. Simulton, Dr. Kincaid, and Mrs. Dahlquist and I, amongst many others, worked on a very, very large grant. The amount of time it took was beyond cumbersome, and this was above and beyond their daily duties. And while the effort was worth it, there are so many grants that we just do not get. And you have to put in that time and effort. But also when there's so much on everybody's plate, I think it's something that I hope that you can look into and your staff as a whole. But I think the people that so far have had all of the information needed for those grants, their capacities are a little overloaded.
The one thing that I've appreciated with Heather, just her organization, so at Cabinet, we have a document with ongoing grants that she keeps updated. I just looked at it the other day, and in that time, like our departments, we've applied for 4 different grants, one in technology, one in food service, one in buildings and grounds, one in transportation. So just about 40 hours of my own time, let alone the people I'm also bringing in to write these grants, and
Right.
we're at least applying for them. It's just sad when we do the applications and we look at that document, it's like, oh, nope, didn't qualify for that one. So,
I'm glad that's added, but I'm curious because you had asked your team, and I was curious to hear from them when it comes to the matching grant piece. Your perspective, if you have one. If not, no big deal.
There's some of both. I mean, there are definitely times when we get together and look at, here's a possibility, but we'd have to put up so much money to
Right.
do that money that we decide that the time and the effort to go through and do that, even if we could find that, was not financially realistic. Or it's so far matched to a very specific need that isn't one of our top priorities right now that would take staff and other means to do it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
We did talk about Dr. Kincaid. Do you remember, because of a lot of information that was coming to us about updating the website so people could see what we applied for, how much we received, and what we did not, the things that we were, and I know your plates are full, but Dr. Kelgati, that might be helpful for transparency when our new CFO comes in, and bringing to the community, here's what we're doing. And the unfortunate times where we don't get those. That $12 million mental health grant was, our team put their heart and souls into. It was terrible that, we didn't get it. But I do remember we did talk about getting that on the website, so maybe we could, I forgot about that, to be honest. I forgot about that, yeah.
good, thank you. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
So the green slide, the revenue, and then the other, the red side is the expenses. So some of the elements that we look at when we project on those expenditures are the cost of increased collective bargaining agreements with our unions. A lot of that is benefits and salary and things of that nature. We also have medical plan increases that we factor in, department budget increases for the district as a whole. This year we had some net staff savings that we have in there, so that's kind of could have been put on the revenue side, but it was a cost deferred, so that we just put that as an expense, so it is a negative expense. Purchase service increase, that's where our transportation contracts, our food service contracts, special ed, private placement, there's always a small increase in some of those contracts, so we factored in a 2.5% increase for that. This year we do have some curriculum renewal dollars available. There have been several board meetings where I know we've talked about instructional resources, and with the increase in CPI, we decided this year to funnel some of those dollars into our ability to engage teams and departments in adopting new curriculum. So Faith will be heading up that initiative. We've got our final year of federal ESSER, so we've got those expenses, and that's where you'll see the match in federal dollars to the revenue. And then in addition to one other of Board Member Johnson's point is the team has discussed several of the salary positions that we brought in. We saw a lot of value, and we used ESSER dollars to pay for those. And in our projections, we do have that last line, continued ESSER salaries after FY '24. We actually have, out of the $12 million we got, we have almost $3 million worth of salaried positions that will continue as part of that coming out of local and state dollars, not ESSER. So some of those conversations are happening. So revenue and expenses, that's the projection way to look at it. And the board and I, we have several conversations about these projections and what they could look like. But now what I'm happy to present to you is the actual tentative budget. So the next slide is what we have when we put all of this information finally into our finance system, where we have, and I'm showing for you here, our estimated FY '24, not a projection, but well, it's still a projection, but this is the closest we can get based on all the information we currently have as to what our expectations are for this year. So local property tax and other local revenue, we're expecting $170 million. Evidence-based funding, I told you it was 97 million. Here I've got 108 because there's a few other, CPPRT and other state level state revenue that we recognize. And then federal revenue is about $14 million. So our total FY '24 revenue, we're looking at about $293.4 million. And I just have a little pie chart up there to show you the percentage breakdown of what that looks like. And then to go along with our revenues, we have our budgeted estimated expenditures. And this is a process that I take a lot of pride in. This is where we meet with every school building, every budget manager, every department. We talk about what their budget was, what their budget is, and what their projections are and what initiatives they have going. And when we enter all of that in, along with salary and benefits, then we talk about our department and school purchase services, the supplies that our district gets and all the different departments, the capital expenses, other objects, the 48 million there, a lot of that, 36 million is our bond and interest payment that we have, and then our non-capital expenses. So you can see that our tentative expenditures are about $287 million. Between now and September, we'll be finalizing a lot of those numbers as well. So as the board may or may not realize or remember from previous years, these numbers could change slightly as we go from August 22nd to September 25th, and we'll inform you of any major changes that happen between that time. And with that said, I just open it up to questions.
Do we know on the capital expense piece how much of, and if you don't, that's okay. I can ask this. I don't need it tonight, but I'm curious. Capital expenses, how much of that is like going into like preventative maintenance or some kind of a? That's a good question.
Yeah. I can share that with the board. It's interesting because that number is greatly inflated from last year. Last year, that number was $150,000, which is typically what Bill gets in his budget for capital expenses. The reason it's 7.7 million this year is because of the debt service extension. So that includes what you're talking about, mission critical work that he's identified, as well as preventative maintenance. So that number is up about $7.6 million from last year, because of the debt service extension dollars that we have.
So it includes preventative as well as scheduled. Do we, and again, I don't need the answer tonight, just at some point, do we know how much of that is on the preventative side? Yep. So that we don't have HVAC units breaking down before they're supposed to? That's just one example.
Yeah, I'll work with Bill again on that and give the board a breakdown on what that looks like. So I think he had a really nice 5-year plan. And what we'll do is add those categories. What's in the 5-year plan, what's mission critical replacement, and what's preventative maintenance. And then the third category was what we titled corrective. So also an explanation of the difference that we had between corrective maintenance and preventative maintenance.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I did a quick calculation because I looked up and I saw salaries and benefits was 68%. And I just don't want, so that includes the debt service. If you take that debt service piece out, the 36 million you were talking about, salaries and benefits, 78 to 80% of our all the money that we spend,
Yeah.
for operations is salaries and benefits. So I just want to make sure that we say that all the time.
And I'm glad you brought up that point because I think it's important to let the community know this includes all funds, debt service and capital improvements. Some districts only report on all the funds, what they call the operational funds. And if you look at just the operational funds without our debt service and without the capital improvements, the salaries and benefits actually account for more like 82 to 85% of our usable budget.
You would pull the 7.7 million out.
And pull the 36 million out and yeah.
So I'm sorry I didn't ask this earlier. I didn't realize. So the 7.7 million, you said that's debt extension.
The reason we have that is in an expense here is because it's recognized as a source of revenue. So our debt service extension, we brought that money in and we're paying it out.
So we're not necessarily looking at $7.7 million in capital improvements this year.
Oh, no, yeah, that's this year, because the debt service extension, if you recall, that was $18 million.
Okay.
So we spent $6 million last year, and we're looking at 7.7 this year, and next year we're looking at another $6.5 to $7 million.
I'm glad that was built into the budget because it's definitely needed.
Yeah.
And yeah, knowing how that's going to get spent would be, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But I think that's an important piece there that, and just to make sure that we all, and make sure I understand this correctly too, without that, you stated we'd have like $150,000. So we have.
That was bad.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
of course, but the point is, like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that's not necessarily going to be there every year either. So that's not really a long-term solution. It's really a short-term solution to the overall
health
of that fund.
Yeah, you hope that it prevents us from having to spend later too. So if done well.
Yeah, like I guess my point is though that a couple years of that isn't necessarily going to.
It's not.
It's not going to equal what we need.
Well, yeah. With how many years at $150,000, right? Yeah.
Right.
And we're playing catch. We're going to be playing catch up for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on that note, just to remind the board that we have some beautiful facilities. They're 20 years old. 20 years old is when things start to fail. So this is a critical time for Bill and his team and all of us to make sure that our facilities have what they need. Otherwise, deteriorated facilities lead to more costly repairs later on.
Got a quick question. This is from my own understanding. Can you go back one slide under revenue? So where is the $7 million a part of that for the revenue source?
Yeah, that would be under local and property. So what I did is we realized it, but the dollars were in working cash. But I moved $7 million out of working cash, and we realized it in our local and property revenue this year. So that number is greater this year than what you've seen in the past because it's $7 million in working cash.
That's what I was asking.
And
Be a separate line, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, we could, in the finance system it is, so.
Yeah, we should probably represent it that way here.
Okay.
And just to reiterate that point, these buildings are 20 years old, and we're still paying on them, and they eat up about $35 million up there. So
Yeah.
I think those pieces are important to connect when we talk about tax bill and all those other things.
Bill and I were really excited. We've been having a lot of conversations about that number because that capital expense dollar, if you look at the facilities we have and how much it costs for preventative maintenance and replacing end-of-life systems, the total we should be putting into our buildings is about $6.5 to $7 million. This is the first year we're actually going to realize that, and we'll have that for this year and next year. But then after that, we're going to have to go back to, okay, what can we do? What's going to take up majority or priority of our financial resources to get done? So we've got a lot to address. So.
One last point, I think that's an important piece because I do have some concerns when we start talking about fiscal year 26, and I know some people are like, wait a minute, we can get through fiscal year 24, but sorry, I'm always long-term, big picture, and so I look at fiscal year 26, and there's some things that that are outside of us, like outside of our control, that scare me. But then there's some things internally too that they're going to come to fruition fiscal year 26. So it's just like one of those things where we want to talk about it because we have to be the historical keepers of that piece.
And I appreciate, last time we've had this conversation all year, but since we attended III last year, the board came back with, I think, a more informed financial picture. So as we attend III this year, just kind of staying involved with those financial conversations. In addition to III, my group, the IASBO, the Illinois Association of School Business Officials, they meet. So we've got a conference coming up in November, and we're talking about the next 4 years of finances. So I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate the board staying informed with a lot of these complex financial kind of factors that we're trying to balance. All right, so with that said, that is our tentative budget presentation, and I look forward to questions, scheduling some one-on-ones with Dr. Calgatti and yourselves, as well as keep you informed if there's any public interest in the budget as well. So this is my opportunity to invite the public to call my office and have the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pensky. All right. Next this evening, we're going to discuss the committees for the fiscal year 23-24. This is an important structure that the board has developed over the years to really provide both for board guidance and involvement in really thinking about our procedures and the ways in which our district is operating. And it's a important way to get both feedback but also open up the dialogue to the broader community. And so this evening I'm going to walk through that with Ms. Dahlquist. We're going to share both some of the substantive changes for this year as well as some of the themes that are going to be focused. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Dahlquist to begin.
Great. Just to refresh the priorities for the Board Advisory Committee, when we put these together, we wanted to have flexibility, speed, and collaboration and allow time for that. And then to also create a place for board members and district staff to have really crucial conversations to build trust, especially around board priorities. So it allows for more in-depth conversations. And then we also still wanted to remain transparent in our communication and our process. So we did some changes last year, and now we've reflected more and have additional changes. Some of the pieces are here on the Board Advisory Committee's list that you can see that we are merging equity and teaching and learning and putting those two committees together. We're expanding it to include 3 board members instead of 2. I do need to say that Dr. Calgatti is going to be on all of these committees moving forward. And then policy and legislation. Previously, that was just policy, but we've heard a big interest in also putting together our work around legislation and working on that. So that will be expanding with that committee. And then finally, taking finance, facilities, and sometimes a little bit of human resources together, where we would be working through those areas. And then I do want to say that on finance and facilities, we may sometimes have closed session items that are in that too. As we look at our new format, I want to reassure everyone that the monthly agendas and minutes are made public and that our public is invited to come. They can make public comment or they can just observe. The agendas, we're going to work together, but it'll be set by district administrators, but then approved by the board. And then a lot of our work will be to preview as we have our annual calendar of work that we do where we've looked at perhaps a curriculum renewal. Then you'll have time to look at it in depth with a smaller group, ask a lot of questions, have more information, maybe shaping of what the board presentations would look like. So we will be building our calendars backwards from the items that are on board agendas and then having those made public in our small committees prior to that. And then other committees that are not board advisory committees but are still very important, the Student Superintendent Advisory Council. I know everybody is really excited about the group of work that comes from those students and raising and listening to those student voices. And then we're going to have a superintendent, a community council, which we're still working through which district administrators and community members would be on that, but we do anticipate that board members would be participating on a rotating basis. Do you have questions or comments for that?
I just have a couple comments. I just want to say I appreciate that equity is not separate. I think it's important that, we do have, teaching and learning with equity, which is really important, but I'm sure equity will also be involved in policy and legislation and finance and facilities, and that we always have, that lens. I also appreciate it that it's more clear, at least to me as a new board member, how things get on the board agenda here, and I understand working backwards from calendar items that are already calendared out. And I think we will, as we go through, these committees, figure out how like new items, like things that aren't necessarily typical, maybe things that we want to do as a board, how they eventually get to us here. And I know that the committees will be an important part of that. And I think it's something that we're going to have to work out as we go through it and figure out how that happens. The only question I have is about, because I missed this when I was reviewing it, the closed session meetings. I'm not a member of that committee, and I know that on the other committees, notes and stuff are open to the public. Will other board members that aren't on that committee during a closed session, will we get notes on what happens?
Yes.
Okay.
So those will be closed session minutes that will be made available to the board
Okay.
for closed session for those meetings, so board members are aware of what happens in those sessions. So
That's actually a really good question, and I participated in an IASB training a couple weeks ago, Illinois Association School Board training.
I did that as well.
Yeah, for that dealt with committees. A couple of things that I took out of there was, which I think would be great to share with the public. Number one, those board committees can go into closed session. I know it says closed session meeting included, but technically any of them could go into closed session. And the reason why I think it's important to share that with the community is we know that we changed the framework of these committees in the past. And I found it enlightening and interesting that when the question came up about having community members on these committees, the answer was actually that it's usually not done. And I think that's something new for much of our community because that's what we were used to. And so when we changed the format, I'm going to tell on myself too, right? I was very reluctant. However, what I think there's an opportunity here is that the superintendent committees then become very important, right? And that is a place where we can bring in community members and should and want to be very active. So I found that training very interesting and enlightening, to say the least. And the only caveat that I'll give that I hope we will monitor is, and I hope we'll give feedback, is if some of these committees get to the point where, while I agree with you, Amy, about having equity and all of this stuff, I mean, I absolutely 100%. But I do look at some of these committees and I wonder, okay, is there a point where we need to monitor where they're getting, it's too much, right? And maybe we really do need a fourth committee or a fifth or whatever the case may be. I'm not saying we need to, but I do hope that we monitor and give some feedback where we say, hey, listen, this committee is getting slammed. We need to think about breaking it up. So
I think that's a really good point to, like, this is new. We're going to try it out. We think it's a good plan, and then we revisit it and say, what do we need to tweak or change around to make sure, that it's working for our needs and for our schools. Mike, I guess you brought up another question for me with the superintendent advisory group. I kind of imagined that, maybe you'll bring more information, in the future, but I imagine that almost as them, as like a stem to the other committees, like they would get information about those other committees through that superintendent advisory group, but maybe you will have a different agenda. And I don't know if that's a question or a comment, but it's something that I'm wondering.
So the superintendent advisory group it's charter in a sense. I'm still working on internally to just kind of flush it out. there have been a variety of ways. So number one, public involvement is always welcome and encouraged for any of the committees. And there's nothing one or better or what. They are all public, join. There'll be the structure for public comment will be in a way where there will be discussion, and then those who are in the public will have an opportunity to weigh in before any further discussion is continued, right? So that's number one. Number two, we intend to ensure that, so the superintendent advisory group, the role of that will be to, there's been a lot of feedback from the community over the last 6 months. Actually, I would say over a year, if you consider the Hanover report from last year, you have 5 Essentials report, you have the superintendent search feedback, you have, over the last really 45 days that I've entered, I've been engaging and listening tours and meet and greets with a variety of stakeholders. So all that information is being synthesized, and we're preparing to really look at an opportunity in these advisory groups to then bring up from each schools and from our various stakeholder partners in the work to say, what are the high-level things that really, are we going the right way? Have we affirmed, have we identified the right core issues? Number two, what are the things that have gotten in the way of those problems? And then number three, what are the solutions? And then start to make some plans for the future. And that's what I'll bring to the board in the initial stage in October. But the goal will be to have 2 of those meetings in September, and then plan for a follow-up meeting after that once we brought those to the board in October. And so that advisory group will initially have 3 to 2, I would say probably 3 to 4 meetings scheduled out throughout the year. 2 on the earlier end, and then as throughout the year. It'll have a different feel than I think some of the the board's community council meetings that have existed in the past. Those will now be focused on the current committee structures versus being this other entity underneath the board.
I definitely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I certainly want to thank you for taking feedback on this. And Mrs. Dahlquist last year, Mrs. Simulton, when we knew that there was an opportunity to kind of reconfigure the committees, and I know I got a lot of feedback from the community, it was in no way to take away voice, but what it was to better inform the board, was to have an opportunity for the admin to tell us more, because we were sometimes making decisions and not really having the opportunity. And so this provided the actual space for us to have those. But the 2 things that I was still struggling with was that feedback being present, and I still would like to know what we're going to do about it, but being able to better provide that feedback to the board, because especially for the policy committee last year, we kind of brushed that a little under the rug because our meetings were so long, and I understand that, and it was all published. However, that is one of our main jobs as a board, is policy. And so I just want to make sure that there is a more formal I don't know about formal, but a communication within our board meetings. You are all doing so great about making sure our agendas are tight and timely and so forth. And so that is so greatly appreciated. But, and maybe with this new process and building the agenda backwards, this will come. But I do think it's important that we talk about those changes that happen, especially when it comes to the policy committee, because that is basically, one of our main goals. And then I really appreciate that we are going to sit down with each committee, identify roles and responsibilities and the purpose of that committee. I think we knew that, but I don't think we took the time at the beginning of our committees when they opened for the year to really put that information kind of in writing and adhere to it. I know on the policy committee, we really broke a few rules because we added so many meetings and had some conversations with community members because they did come and we felt like they deserved that time. But to talk about what we're there for and stay on track and make sure that we get it done. The policy committee did a ton last year, and Heather, you did a phenomenal job. And we did have community involvement, but I strongly encourage anybody that has a question to find the committee. If it's a curriculum question, come to a committee meeting. If it's a finance question, go to the finance committee meeting. Those are open meetings. Please go. That interaction is really important. So thank you for taking a look again and continuing to refine. I love the idea of continuous improvement, so I appreciate it.
Can I ask when we're going to hit the ground running? with these?
So we've been working on calendaring are you talking about the committees? Yes, so we're working on calendaring. I know that the board secretary has begun the process of getting everybody's doodles, getting the doodle polls or the structure for make sure we have those dates set up. And then we will have, I would say, no later than the next meeting, clarity of when those meetings will happen. So we're taking a poll from the board members so that we can publish those dates.
Time's a wasting.
Yes, it is.
For policy,
I think
does that
everybody's
work,
been
Heather?
doing
Do you have an update that you need to address by a certain time?
We have a current policy review that needs to be addressed. So yes, the sooner the better for policy, because there is a pending issue right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Action item 8.1, approval of snow removal contract. Can I have a motion?
Snow removal on a heat.
This is
It
not a
is
joke.
100 degrees
This is a
outside.
real question.
Hey, might get it all in one foul swoop, and hopefully not, right? Make a motion to award the 2023-2024 snow removal services contract to Montgomery Landscaping for the 11 buildings outlined in the memo.
Second.
Ms. Venmus,
Aye.
Dr. Mario,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Ms. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Ploger.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Action item 8.2, resolution providing the issue of general obligation refunding bonds. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to adopt the resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed $9,900,000 general obligation refunding school bond.
9,990,000.
Oh, what did I say? Oh, let me rephrase that. Make a motion to adopt the resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed $9,990,000. Thank you, sorry. General obligation refunding school bonds of the school district for the purpose of refunding certain outstanding bonds of said school district, providing for the levy of a direct annual tax sufficient to pay the principal and interest on said bonds, authorizing the sale of said bonds to the purchaser thereof, and authorizing the execution of certain escrow agreements in connection therewith as presented.
Second.
Dr. Mario,
Aye.
Ms. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Ploger,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Ms. Venmus,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Action item 8.3, approval of resolution calling for a public hearing on the fiscal year 24 budget. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to approve the resolution calling for a public hearing on the fiscal year 24 budget.
Second.
Ms. Simulton,
Aye.
Dr. Mario,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Ms. Venmus,
Aye.
Mr. Ploger.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Action item 8.4, approval of personnel report. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to approve the personnel report as discussed and presented.
Second.
Ms. Venmus,
Aye.
Dr. Mario,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Ms. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Ploger.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Action item 10.1. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.